Recently, I've been having a heap of mini unburdenings, which is so exciting because for such a long time, my system carried so much pain that even in therapy, I couldn't, for months and months and months, come close to helping parts unburden. And so the thought that during the day, these things are just happening in a way that just is easeful, and there's like movement inside of my, I often talk about feeling differently inside of my skin, right? So there's movement and spaciousness around, oh, this thing that would normally have tripped me up, not only does it rarely trip me up anymore, but even when it does, it's something where I can go, could you guys want to tell me about that? Do you want to tell me what happens there? And as I'm doing that little process, I'm starting to notice just how much part of what trips me up is related to a story my parts tell myself about what the person means, which has been a really big revelation. And I have a voice who's saying to me, that's pretty obvious. But when you get something, I think in the IFS space, what's beautiful is when we get it in a visceral way from our parts, it feels different. And so as I'm getting like, oh, okay, so you tell yourself a story about this thing. Do you want to tell me about where that comes from, that story? Or maybe I already know and I say, makes sense to me. You tell yourself that story. Do you want to talk to me about it? And so then I can have this moment with my part about the thing. So it's no longer about that person did or I'm upset about or, the thing that's kind of activating. It's now, okay. The reason I'm upset about that is partly because of the person and partly because I tell myself a story. And then there's an impulse to act that's tethered to something that I can really either make sense of in my system or I can ask the part about. And then on top of that, I can ask them, do they want help with that? So I'll give you an example. This is not to do with a friend. For a really long time when I was younger, I used to be very afraid of what was under the bed. I was afraid of the blackness that was under the bed, that I would get sucked into there. And then when I was going through some of my trauma therapy, at some point, I can't remember how old I was at that point, but it wasn't, it was like maybe 15, 20 years ago. I wasn't young. And that I went through in that process of therapy, I went through a second phase of feeling afraid of what was under the bed because it was coming up in therapy. And I would jump from my doorway to my bed as an adult. And then, I worked with that with my therapist and things improved. I haven't had that for a while. And the other night, my parts were starting to feel afraid of something under the bed again. And so I definitely had a part who's like going, oh no, we're not going to do this again. And as much as I was like, well, if we are, it's a trailhead and we can find out what more the part wants us to get. But it ended up just being a reparenting moment. I was able to be with my parts and say to them, it makes sense that you're bringing this up again. There must be something important. And they kind of were just basically telling me they're afraid of the dark. And they were telling me about what they're afraid of under the bed. And I was able to say to them, there's nothing under the bed. Do you know we could get a flashlight and I could take you under there and we could go and have a look if you want? And their little eyes just lit up like, could you? Really? And I could really see how if you were a parent with a small child and they told you, I'm really scared that something's under the bed, and you went down there with a flashlight, as long as it's not actually attached to some trauma or other bigger problem, right? If it was just some small thing, that attention might help the child feel safer. And also the proof of that. And that's kind of what I did in that moment that night. And so when I did that to my parts, they were so surprised at first. And then they just kind of like got tucked up with me. And they said, well, can you sleep with us anyway? Which of course I do every night because they're here with me. And so I was able to kind of say, yeah, we can be tucked up to bed together. And I kind of actually saw myself in my childhood bed at home with my parts, even though I was here, but being in a way that was like corrective for back then. It was like a mini do-over and a kind of mini unburdening, and that was a few nights ago, and I haven't had that come up again. And if it does, that's okay for me. So these little moments, whether, as I said, I was talking about the friend earlier, that's definitely been a thing that has been coming up throughout the day. I had something else with my IFS practitioner where my parts got really mad, and it was so instructive around, what do you need me to get? I haven't had that experience since I was back in the transference about 4 years ago. So yeah, I just think these things are so beautiful and important to share about what the healing journey can really look like. And we can come to a place where everyday interactions are things that we can help our parts unburden in the moment.